Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips, and I have just one topic to talk about today, but I have a lot to say about it. And it's incredibly distressing to me, so I'll tell you what's going on and then I'll tell you what we're going to do about it. I'm trying not to talk about problems without having solutions. That's what this company is all about. According to a new analysis, approximately 1 in 6 adults in the United States reports taking at least one psychiatric drug. And here's the most disturbing part: 84.3% of these people who take the drugs use them in the long term. Now, long term is defined as filling at least 3 prescriptions during 1 calendar year. And the reason why this is so distressing is that there is no evidence supporting the idea that these drugs are safe in the long term. The average person taking the drugs filled 9.8 prescriptions during the 2013 calendar year. One of the reasons for that is that many people don't just take one drug, but they take several. Thomas J. Moore is lead author of the analysis, and he's the senior scientist for drug safety and policy at the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. Moore says there are serious safety concerns about this situation, since 8 out of 10 of the most commonly prescribed drugs on the list in terms of this particular analysis are DEA Schedule IV controlled substances, have warning labels about withdrawal symptoms, or both. Moore and his colleagues looked at data from the 2013 Medical Expenditure Panel survey, which included information on adult usage of antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety drugs, sedatives, and hypnotics in people age 18 to 85. This involved 242 million American adults, and 16.7% of them reported filing at least one prescription for at least one of these drugs in 2013. Usage was very high, much higher in adults over the age of 60, with 25.1% of patients at that age or older reporting that they take the drugs. Now, one of the reasons this is concerning is, according to data, fewer people in that age range actually qualify for having conditions for which these drugs are prescribed. Twice as many women as men took the drugs. Caucasians used them twice as often as African Americans, 3 times as often as Hispanics. And the Asian population least likely to use the drug, with penetration of only 4.8%. Zoloft was the most prescribed of the drugs, and the top 10 included several other SSRIs, benzodiazepines, and one hypnotic. Now, if you're not familiar with hypnotics, these include barbiturates. They're addictive, and they are absolutely not recommended for long-term use. In fact, what they are supposed to be used for most of the time is in inpatient facilities to calm down patients who are withdrawing from stimulant drugs. Moore says both doctors and patients should be periodically evaluating the need for the drugs for 2 reasons. One is that in the case of depression, a lot of these conditions, it tends to be cyclical. The other is that it's not really clear that they're beneficial, with Moore pointing out that depressed patients taking placebo experienced 50% improvement in their symptoms after just 6 weeks in the clinical trials. Well, this is not included in Moore's analysis, but the results of clinical trials for psychiatric drugs are far worse than that. Take Xanax, for example, which is prescribed for anxiety. Trials were conducted comparing Xanax to placebo at 8 different locations for 8 weeks. And then there were withdrawal studies going on at 2 sites. Now, the reason why a withdrawal study had to be included in all of this is that you're not supposed to take benzos for a long period of time. So there has to be, as part of the protocol, some type of plan for withdrawing from them. Well, at 4 weeks, the patients taking Xanax were doing lots better than the patients taking placebo, but at 8 weeks, there was absolutely no difference between the groups except for the side effects, which included those on the drugs, slurred speech, amnesia, and impaired coordination. Now, the taper situation was far worse. Xanax patients were significantly worse than placebo patients, and they almost all had to start taking the drug again. 35% of the patients taking Xanax reported having panic attacks that were far worse than the ones that led them to take the drug in the first place. New symptoms developed during withdrawal and were experienced by 35% of the patients, and those included, listen to this list: confusion, depression, feeling that insects were crawling on them, muscle cramps, blurred vision, diarrhea, decreased appetite, and weight loss. At the end of the withdrawal period, Xanax patients were having 6.8 panic attacks per week, while those taking the placebo only 1.8. I mean, the outcomes were clearly worse. So how did Xanax get approved? Well, All you have to do if you're a drug company is change the endpoint. Remember that the Xanax patients were doing a little bit better at 4 weeks than the placebo patients? Well, the trial was supposed to run for 8 weeks. They just changed the endpoint to 4 weeks, and when the patients were better, and the drug got approved by the FDA. Now, the FDA knew about the changed endpoint. They approved the drug anyway. The same thing happened with Prozac, by the way. Eli Lilly used 5 different trials, data from 5 different trials, all of which had design flaws. Benzos were needed to reduce agitation, a known side effect of Prozac, by the way, and many patients had to be given sedatives so that they could sleep. 2 trials showed no benefit. When you put all 5 together, Prozac was only 1 point better than placebo in HAM-D scores, which is a clinically meaningless difference. It means that there was no difference between Prozac and placebo, and yet the drug was approved anyway. So in terms of these drugs being approved, does that really say anything about them? Absolutely not. The FDA approves 94-95% of the drugs that they review anyway. Moore also expressed a concern about side effects going back to the original article, which can be quite serious, and the fact that withdrawal can be quite difficult. And he said to a media outlet, to discover that 8 in 10 adults who've taken psychiatric drugs are using them long-term raises safety concerns, given that there's reason to believe that some of this continued use is due to dependence and withdrawal symptoms. He advised that careful tapering might make it easier to discontinue the drugs, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Moore has performed similar and equally disturbing analyses on this group of drugs before. A 2015 report addressed prescribing practices for Ambien, a sleep drug, which is the #1 drug, psychiatric drug, linked to emergency room visits, according to the Centers for Disease Control. While recommended for short-term use, 68% of patients take the drug long-term. And this is extremely concerning. The report showed that 22% of the people who take Ambien in the long term also use opioid drugs as well in the long term. The FDA recommends that women and elderly people take very low doses, 5 milligram doses or extended release versions of the drug, but only 5% of women and 10% of the elderly are prescribed the appropriate dosages according to the FDA. Moore's 2015 report showed that antidepressant use had almost doubled between the period of 1999 to 2000 and 2009 and 2010, and long-term use also doubled as well. The trend was growing faster in patients who were given prescriptions by their family practice or general practitioner doctors. The drug companies and the psychiatric profession have just done an incredible job selling a false story about the origin of the conditions for which these drugs are prescribed. There is absolutely no evidence to support the idea, reliable evidence to support the idea that there is any such thing as a chemical imbalance in the brain as a cause for depression, anxiety, and other psychological disorders. And this story has been sold not only to the public, but to medical doctors as well. Now, it is understandable that the public would not be aware of this deception, but it is almost hard to imagine that doctors have bought this story hook, line, and sinker and continue to believe it and prescribe accordingly. I think that this should send, it's a frightening thing, I think it should send a cautionary message to every patient out there that consumers have got to be informed, because in many cases doctors are not. And of course, I'm generalizing here. There's some very good doctors out there who don't do these types of things that I'm talking about, but they're the exception and not the rule. Now, I mentioned I would tell you what we're doing about this. We're very excited because very soon, I told you this is going to be a big year of announcements and things happening. We will be launching our first course through the Wellness Forum Institute in conjunction with Dr. Peter Breggin, the psychiatrist in Ithaca, very well-known psychiatrist, who many of you have heard me speak about over the years. And this one will be why and how to withdraw from psychiatric drugs. This course will be for medical doctors who want to learn how to do this properly, psychiatrists, mental health professionals who want to be part of a support team to help patients withdraw from drugs, family members, clergy, court officials, attorneys, guardians, anybody who is in the business of helping anybody who is taking these drugs and requires assistance. That's what the course, that's the population the course will be for. And we have an excellent teaching staff. Dr. Breggin will be teaching part of the program. We have a marvelous psychiatrist in Maryland, very forward-thinking, dynamite lady who you're going to love. She's going to teach part of it. And and we're very excited about this. I like to talk about problems, but I like solving problems, and this is the first step we're taking to actually have formal programs to deal with this very, very important issue. So stay tuned. I always give announcements on video clips. You'll have an opportunity to learn more about this, and ample time to sign up to take the course and learn more about all of this. This is a despicable problem. It affects an awful lot of our population, and we have to do something about it. So anyway, that's all for today and for the week. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you next week with more news.